This podcast is dedicated to the memory of my grandmother, Helen Margaret Tower. It is now time for Diary of a Wrestling Fan with Bill Chase. And now, here he is, the man who once defeated Maki Ito in a sing-off, Bill Chase! Thank you, Mr. Podcast Announcer, and welcome to another edition of Diary of a Wrestling Fan, the podcast that chronicles my 33 and close to 34 amazing years of being a fan of professional wrestling. Thank you for listening on Spotify, on Anchor, wherever podcasts are streamed. Hit follow, hit subscribe, and if you're listening to this on YouTube, hit that subscribe button right now. Well, folks, I'm back after a little hiatus. As you may have heard here at the top of the podcast, sadly, my grandmother recently passed away at the age of 82. She had her, her experiences with wrestling as well, for the most part. Myself and my cousins annoying her with it. No, she actually visited the old Hamilton Forum on several occasions there, and she loved the, I don't know if I can use that term now, but the little people. There we go, yeah. And she really enjoyed watching them. Her favorite was Little Beaver. Little Beaver, of course, was at WrestleMania 3. So there you go. My grandmother had an interest in wrestling years ago, but didn't really continue after the forum shut down and they stopped running shows. But either way, she was always, I don't understand why you like that crap. But no, she was always, she didn't criticize us for liking it, though. That's what I mean. She was very encouraging in anything that we liked, and she was also very happy to see me getting involved in the Ontario Independent Circuit. So I do miss her a lot, and I'm gonna miss her going forward. It's rough for the family, but at least we have a lot of good memories. But indeed, this week we are doing WrestleMania VIII. Now, before we get to that, what I want to do is I want to give a quick plug, of course, to Pro Wrestling Ontario. You can find us on all social media platforms: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We're going to be getting a TikTok account sometime in the future, too. So we're not quite on every platform, but we're getting there. Also, we just put up a Linktree account as well. You can find the links to everything. You can find our shows online, subscription service on Independent Wrestling TV, also our merchandise store, our YouTube channel, which if you're listening to this on YouTube, you can scroll to the corner of the video. That's a link to our channel. Hit subscribe, like the videos, hit that notifications bell, leave some comments. We've added great 15 weeks of content, new episodes of Foundation. We even have a weather report with Doc Richards. We have our internet champion, the Wanderer, Wade Allen, checking in every week. And just this past week, as I record this, we had the finals of the Foundry tournament. The winner receives an open weight title shot. Fatal 4-way elimination match between Evan Greenaway, Straight Up Taylor Cadine, the Bone Crusher Steve Brown, and Antihero SOS. Again, that's Pro Wrestling Ontario. All right, we're going to get right into it. WrestleMania VIII, of course, took place way back almost 29 years ago. The date was April 5th, 1992, from the Hoosier Dome in Indianapolis, Indiana. Drew a crowd of well over 60,000, not backshowing the fact that business wasn't doing all that great at the time. But either way, for this fan who was, just went from a simple fan to obsessed with it just several months before when Jake the Snake Roberts unleashed his Cobra on the Macho Man. This is a big one for me. This was the first WrestleMania I watched on pay-per-view. Not the first one I've seen, but the first one I watched on pay-per-view. Now, the build-up to this, of course, was just chaotic and all over the place. Now, of course, I just recently did a podcast on the 1992 Royal Rumble. Again, check it out in the archives. It's one of my favorite episodes that I've done. And I have to say that despite the fact that business may not have been the greatest, there was a lot of good stuff happening. And I don't know whether or not people just were growing tired of Hogan. As a fan, I really wasn't. But were people just not liking seeing the same guys over and over? I don't know. Did Hogan's appearance on Arsenio and the arrest of Dr. George Zahorian really get to that many fans? I doubt it, because I don't think too many casual fans really knew about it until the scandals truly hit, which was right around this time. I will say that, however. but it wasn't quite around, like, when the Royal Rumble happened, the scandals weren't really out there other than Sahorian's arrest and whatnot, and conviction. So, logically, the reason why business was falling apart is anyone's guess. It wasn't falling apart to the point where it would later in the year. Later in the year, it just bottomed out completely. But, again, I'm going to draw this from my perspective as a fan, and also, of course, I look at things in hindsight, that's what I do on this podcast, but mainly look back on what I was doing as a fan. Now, in April of 92, I was in grade 3. And, of course, I mentioned that in the other podcasts I've done in 1992, which I've done a lot recently. I've done the Royal Rumble, I've done Super Brawl, and now I'm doing WrestleMania. So, WrestleMania, of course, is... I don't need to explain it to anyone listening to this. You all know the significance of it. Even as a 9-year-old kid, I understood it. You know what I mean? I understood the hype behind it. I understood... Not as much as I would when I was older, mind you, but I still realized... I knew how big the Super Bowl was, so I knew how big WrestleMania was. And you know what? I was geared up for it. Now, we all know things didn't go the way that they were supposed to, or at least was initially announced. Now, of course, the Royal Rumble ended with that infamous finish where Hulk Hogan actually cost Sid Justice the match, being bitter after being eliminated by his supposed friend. And the crowd sided with Sid, which is not surprising. And if you look at this in hindsight, and even as a kid, I'm thinking Hogan was being kind of a jerk. And someone think, well, maybe that's the reason for bad box office. Well, I mean, maybe. But, like, I can't get in every fan's head in 1992. I mean, I know some people just got sick of it. But at the same time, though, I'm watching this every week just enthralled with what's going on. Now, I knew that Ric Flair was a star. I didn't see a great ton of him in WCW. I didn't watch every single week when he was there, but I knew who he was. I knew he was a big deal. So, and again, from the wrestling magazines, Pro Wrestling Illustrated, and, Inside Wrestling and all that, and The Wrestler, like, I remember reading a lot about him. So, knowing a match with him and Hulk Hogan has such a high magnitude, even at a young age, is something to look forward to. Now they built it up so perfectly. Now, again, this is where, this 1992 is not a year that a lot of people talk about when it comes to wrestling fans. For me, it was huge. Because even in hindsight, I'm looking back on some of these shows, and I'm like, this was good stuff. This was good storytelling. The way they hyped it up, it was so well done. Now, when Flair won the Rumble and became the champion, a little while later on television, they announced that Jack Tunney will name the number one contender for a title shot at WrestleMania, and the candidates were, again, the men who performed well in the Rumble, and pretty much the tippy-top guys at the time. We're talking Roddy Piper, who just won the Intercontinental title. The Undertaker, who, of course, was a recent champion. Hulk Hogan, need I say more? The Macho Man, again, need I say more? And Sid Justice, who, again, was massively over with fans, who, despite the fact that he'd missed a great portion of his time in the WWF so far with injuries, either way, though, he was well-liked. He was an instant hit when he came in. I remember seeing him do the squashes on Superstars when he, just shortly after SummerSlam 91, and the crowd just loved him. Even watching the Raw, like, Sid is a guy who's one of the biggest enigmas in wrestling. Now, people can make fun of him for his ring work. I find if he's in there with the right guy, his matches are pretty damn good. It's the intensity. Guys with intensity seem to get over. It's like that with Ahmed Johnson, not the best wrestler in the world, but he was over. I'm not saying he was over to the point Sid was, but still, Ahmed, for his time, had a following. I think, again, Sid's natural presence is what drew fans in, and, some people make fun of his promos, but he's had some good ones. I'm not saying I'm not saying he's Nick Bockwinkel on the microphone, but he had some decent ones. Unless you keep off the subject of having half the mind that other people do, or whatever, twice the man. I don't know. Even I'm botching it now. Or trying to yell cut during a live pay-per-view promo. But either way, that sort of stuff, whatever, that happens. But, Sid, you can't say Sid was ever boring. I never found the man boring. But as a fan, I'm like, and again, this is good stuff. Like, I mean, the fact that they're hyping up the tippy-top guys and people debating who's it going to be now, I think we all knew in our heads it would be Hogan. But to think about it, Piper and Flair had an issue. The Undertaker was a heel at the time. He was mere weeks away from turning face, but still, he was, technically still a heel, even though he was getting big reactions. Savage, again, he would have been a good candidate, but I think we all knew where this was going. But it was nice to build that interest for the big press conference for WrestleMania, the WrestleMania VIII press conference held by Jack Tunney. So here's the thing. Now you get conflicting reports about this. Hulk Hogan was announced, of course, as the number one contender. And you see the camera right on... Now, before Jack Tunney made the announcement, you see Sid stand up, pulling like a freaking 50 Cent or Derek Zoolander. And Sid predated all of them and stood up before Jack Tunney actually made the announcement because he was thinking it was guaranteed it was him because he was the final man eliminated in the Rumble. Which, to be fair, he has probable cause there to think he is the number one contender. I mean, he was the final man eliminated before Flair won. So, logically, you'd think he would be the guy. And, of course, he's right to be angry. And he cuts this really angry promo after Hogan makes the announcement, like they announce it as Hogan. So, now many people say the reason why the Hogan-Flair match, spoiler, never happened was because of a few reasons. Some said, well, it's because Hogan's leaving and they don't want him to have the job to Flair on the way out. Again, that could be true. Others say it's because the houses between them didn't draw very well. That's not entirely true. The houses some markets that they were in did draw quite well, but I don't think it was to the point where I guess that WWF thought they would. If you look at the numbers, and I've researched them, they're good. They're good numbers. They were drawing better than the Hogan and Slaughter matches. Some markets did fail, but again, not every market's going to be a winner sometimes, even when you're Hulk Hogan. I do think there was an audience for this match, as they would later prove in WCW a couple years later, spoiler, and maybe there's some apprehensiveness of it, or maybe it's because Hogan truly wanted to take some time off, and again, spoiler again, he went off and filmed Mr. Nanny after this. So clearly they're building towards him and Sid, if you look at this in hindsight. And as I said to my father, I remember saying to him, why are they announcing Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair as the main event, which I was looking forward to, when him and Sid Justice have an issue? And my dad didn't actually have an answer, and he usually had an answer for everything when it came to like wrestling and that, because again, he read those Toronto Sun articles. I remember they announced Saturday night's main event at this time. Now, clearly the direction it seemed they were headed for WrestleMania, other than Sid and, maybe Sid turning and whatnot. If it was going to be Hogan and Flair, then it makes you think, what was the wrestler card going to be? I was thinking it was going to be the final payoff between the Macho Man and Jake the Snake Roberts. I'm thinking the Undertaker and Sid, because they had a thing going for a while. So it makes you wonder what the wrestler card would have been. And I have to say, I was watching Superstars and Wrestling Challenge religiously every week leading up to this, and I got hyped up for Saturday night's main event, because when I was younger, I couldn't stay up and watch it. Although one of the earliest memories I do have of wrestling is waking up in the middle of the night. I guess I just couldn't sleep, or I wasn't feeling well or whatever. And my dad was up, he was watching TV, and there was Saturday night's main event on, and it was that awesome match between the Macho Man and Bret Hart from November of 1987, shortly around the first Survivor Series, just after. It was taped before, but it aired just after. So I knew Saturday night's main event was a big deal. It was like that, as a kid, you had that forbidden thing you're not allowed to do. Like, everybody wants to stay up late. But the thing is, I was 8 years old when it last aired on NBC. It wasn't until I was closer to 9 that, even on weekends, my parents were a little more lenient with my bedtime. So, logically, I'm thinking this is a huge deal. Like, this felt like a big deal. I remember we were at the mall, Jackson Square, the day the Saturday night's main event was going to air. And we went shopping at a novelty shop, and I found a keychain of Hulk Hogan. It was like a little mini Hulk Hogan figure. It was a keychain, though. And, of course, I had to buy it, because, again, that was the night was going to be him and Sid against Ric Flair and The Undertaker. Now, being the naive 9-year-old I was, I'm thinking, I'm pushing 9 at this point. I'm thinking to myself, you know what? I guess Sid and Hogan are going to make it because they're tagging up. I didn't see Sid's promo. I would see it later on, I think about a week later. there where he apologized to Hogan very insincerely. Anyone could see it, but I didn't. I must have missed that somehow, which I don't understand because I was still watched like both shows, Superstars and Challenge. I'm maybe just out of the room or whatever. But yeah, they had that promo, and you could see in now as the show started. Now you could see that Sid and Hogan weren't on the same page, and even as a kid, like I remember watching it with my dad on our house on Clyde Street, and that locker room exchange between them really awkward, and Sid just looked like he was pissed and very insincere when it came to like being buddies with Hogan. And Brutus Beefcake was with them, and Brutus, of course, was out of action at the time with the parasailing accident. So my dad, I remember, looks at me, he's like, uh-oh. And I remember watching it, and I remember the part where Hogan got the double clothesline out of the corner to take out Flair and Taker. Calling us Sid, and I'm just thinking, oh, he's not going to tag him. He's not going to tag him. And lo and behold, he did not. And I remember I had not a shocked look on my face, but just like, wow, it actually happened. So I said to my dad, what's going to happen for WrestleMania? And he's like, I don't know. And he said they're probably going to change the matches. But I'm like, well, who's going to fight Flair? And here's another cool thing about that show. There was an insert promo from Bret Hart. Now, keep in mind, again, Vince did not book face versus face very often. But Bret Hart, of course, saying to Piper, who, again, their friendship was on display more than Hogan and Sid. So I'm going to get to this comparison in a second. Okay, so Hogan and Sid, they're supposed to be like built as these close friends, but really, Sid was out of action for the longest time. Other than their interaction at SummerSlam, you didn't really see them interact. Bret and Piper, at least, it seemed as though they had more interaction because remember when the lead up to Survivor Series 91, when they're on the same team, that made more sense. And they built up the fact that they were family pretty much. And then Bret cut in that promo saying he wants his belt back. Now, for those who don't know the story, Bret lost the title because, again, there's conflicting stories about this too. The issue about Bret going to WCW or jumping or whatever. And of course, they said Bret had 104-degree fever to protect him and whatnot. And Mountie won the title, then dropped it to Piper at the Rumble. It was supposed to be Bret and the Mountie at the Rumble. So basically, I'm like thinking this could be something. I remember my mouth was hanging open. I'm looking at my dad. I'm like, wow, Bret Hart and Rowdy Piper. I called him Rowdy Piper. And yeah, I was hyped for that too. And like, oh my goodness, this WrestleMania is going to be amazing. So after the Sid turn was complete, pretty much, Hogan was Hogan. Has to pose, brother. But the actual main event for Saturday Night's main event. Now, I should give a little backstory here. The reason why I didn't, again, Saturday Night's main event was usually on 11:30. Of course, those of you mostly know, Saturday Night taking the slot of a Saturday Night Live rerun. So they would preempt it. So the thing was, though, NBC ended their deal with the WWF, and Fox took the deal, and they aired it at an earlier time. It was around 9 o'clock, I think. 8 or 9 o'clock. And so the main event that night was the Macho Man against Jake the Snake Roberts, and Macho just beat the piss out of him. Which, again, this was pretty much the end of the feud right here, at least on television. And they just aired it with Macho and Elizabeth celebrating. That was it. That was it. And then you tuned into Superstars the following week. They said, Vince kept hyping, we'll show you what you did see, and what you didn't see, you won't believe it. So I'm anticipating this, and I'm anxious about it. And then we see Jake waiting behind the curtain with a chair, ready to smash whoever comes through the curtain. And it was going to be Elizabeth coming through first. And I'm like, oh my goodness. But I'm like thinking, somebody's got to stop him. We had no idea who it was going to be. So he takes a seat, he puts the chair back, ready to swing. Suddenly, that familiar gray glove. I'm like, no! Like, no way! And it was The Undertaker. And I remember that was a big talk around the water fountain at school, like with my friend Sandra and that, and Ricky and all them, and Chad. We were discussing The Undertaker becoming a good guy. We couldn't believe it, but we loved it. Because there was something intriguing about his character. The thing is, I hated all heels, obviously, back when I was a kid, but I never hated The Undertaker because, I don't know, there's just something about him. I mean, I didn't love him either until he turned, but there's just something about him that I enjoyed a lot. Like, I don't know. Like, it's hard to, again, he just has that presence, right? So, I remember then the funeral parlor segment where Jake attacked Paul Bearer and The Undertaker. Now, I always love that line, like, when Jake's like, just whose side are you on? Undertaker, not yours. That was freaking great. I remember the crowd reaction was insane. And then, yeah, Jake locked The Undertaker's hand in the casket, trapping it. Then he DDTs Paul Bearer, hits The Undertaker repeatedly with chairs, but he just keeps coming at him, dragging the casket with him. It was a really cool visual. I really enjoyed this segment. And so they changed WrestleMania around completely. So in addition to Hogan and Flair not happening, it's now Hogan and Sid. So they announced a new number one contender as the Macho Man. And I was fine with this. I liked the Macho Man. And I'm thinking this could be really cool. And like, he could be a champion again. Like, he's had the comeback story against Jake and that. And thinking, this is awesome. Then they officially announced Taker and Jake. They announced a lot of other matches too. Now, of course, at this time, Shawn Michaels was, just turned heel. He just done the barbershop window just before the Rumble. And I remember us making fun of him. We called him in school. He was Sean Sissy Sean. Yeah. We used to call him Sissy Sean back. And yet, don't get offended, anyone. Okay, I was 9. You know what I mean? But yeah, we didn't use a certain F word with 3 letters. So let's just say that, although I know a few people who did. Some I'm related to. But anyway, I'll digress. So I hated Sean almost more than anyone on the roster at that point. Because he was so good at being a cocky little asshole. Even back then, even before he was a big name as a singles. I mean, he was already well known, obviously. So they announced him and Tito Santana for WrestleMania. And of course, me being a naive young fan, I'm thinking Tito's going to kill him. Hit him with that flying forearm. Because the El Matador character had actually been pretty protected on television. I remember seeing him win matches against like other guys in the mid-card like Skinner and whatnot. And like Hercules, so like it was. I'm thinking Tito, again on a hot streak, is gonna win. They also announced Owen Hart versus Skinner. Again, you think a match, if on paper, if you look at Steve Keirn and you just look at Owen Hart as a whole, there could have been a time and a place that match could have been a classic. Just saying. You know what I mean? But at the time, the Gator Man, like spitting tobacco juice, my dad was disgusted by Skinner. As a matter of fact, whenever they would tape Superstars for me, my dad would like watch it with me sometimes because he didn't watch it either, and he'd fast forward through Skinner's match. He's like, I don't want to watch this slob. Like, seriously, Skinner had changed the channel heat with my dad. I didn't mind him. Whatever. He was who he was. I mean, I hated him, obviously, but I don't know, it just didn't bother me that much. I mean, he was disgusting, let's face facts. And yeah, there was other matches announced too. The Natural Disasters turning face was kind of strange. But again, I hated DiBiase and IRS, so they were challenging them for the tag team titles. And that was a good story there too. Jimmy Hart selling out the Natural Disasters for Money Incorporated, his new tag team, to get the tag team title shots against the Legion of Doom, and Money Inc. winning the titles. So there you go. I thought that was some good storytelling there. They announced an 8-man tag, Tatanka versus Rick Martel, and we're going to get to all that. But the hype on television was really well done. But of course, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about that big angle. And that Psycho Sid Justice, destroying the barbershop and getting like barber cream, hair cream all over his face. Nah, just kidding. Although that did happen. Like something bounced when he was destroying it with a chair and it just like exploded in his face. It's like a moose or something like that. I don't know. But anyway, the angle I'm talking about. She was mine before she was yours. Woo! Yes, I know. That's not the best Ric Flair impression. Give me a break. That storyline is still one of my all-time favorites. The setup was amazing, and it was pure Flair at his finest. It was an interview that me and Gene was conducting with him on location. And he suddenly pulled out this photo of him and Elizabeth by a swimming pool. And that's when he dished out that infamous line, "She was mine before she was yours." And these vignettes took up TV for weeks. The magazine, I remember the magazine. I want to get the magazine because Flair promised more photos. They show them on TV. And they didn't show every single one of them, but like Flair said, these photos will be published in WWF magazine. And I'm like, I have to get that issue. Because are they real? And Macho Man didn't respond right away. So that made you think, what's going on? I don't know. But just the pure dickheadedness of Flair had me emotionally invested every week. The dinner with Vince McMahon interviewing him. Again, this was some great stuff. And Flair insisting that he had Elizabeth before Macho Man did. And just remember Macho cut a crazed promo. Of course, like, what, there was any other kind with him? Untrue! Not true. Like, oh, so good. And one of my favorites, though, was, again, closer to the show, in the airport hangar, where Flair was cutting a promo outdoors. Me and Gene was interviewing him, and they drop a bombshell. And I remember the line I loved from that was Flair's like, "Liz, you were there and you loved it. You loved it. And now you want back in? Well, baby, there's no way." And I remember I hated Flair at the time. I couldn't stop watching these. Like, I loved this. And again, that's what it was. It got me ready, like, oh, Macho Man's going to kill him. Because we all knew how crazy Macho was. So we were hyped for that. And then, of course, that's when Mr. Perfect drops the bombshell. Mr. Perfect, for those of you who may not know, was like playing Ric Flair's like manager, but they call it executive consultant, but still. Perfect, of course, was out of action with a serious back injury. This was a way to keep him on the roster, kind of deal, give him something to do, and he was perfect. Yeah, pun intended. He was perfect in the role. He drops the bombshell of the centerfold, the prize photo of Miss Elizabeth, which they're going to unveil at WrestleMania. More reason to get hyped up for this feud and this match. It was unbelievable. WrestleMania VIII was looking superb. It was looking like it's going to be the shows. For this 9-year-old kid, it was going to be the show of shows. And then something happened, which I knew very little of, but I saw a little bit of. Right before WrestleMania, this all started taking place in March, around the time of my 9th birthday, which I had discussed prior, covering Super Brawl. Accusations of sexual misconduct lobbied against Pat Patterson, Mel Phillips, and Terry Garvin. Now, most of you listening know who Pat Patterson is. Terry Garvin was another former wrestler who also worked in the same capacity that Pat did as a backstage like road agent. Mel Phillips was a longtime ring announcer who was also in charge of the ring crew. They were accused of, I don't want to go into too much detail here about that, sexual misconduct, let's just say, with younger boys. And the only thing I remember about seeing this, and I'm pretty sure, I don't know if, I'm thinking my dad probably knew about it, but because he watched the news quite thoroughly. The only time I saw anything about this was on CHCH News, but it was a very vague report, only like a couple minutes. And I saw part of Geraldo's horrendous show, Now It Can Be Told. I didn't see Donahue when it first aired, the infamous Donahue interview, where Barry Orton, or Barry O, again, yes, he is related to Randy, he's his uncle. Murray Hodgson, a short-lived announcer for the company, and several others, those were the principal ones though it seemed, made accusations against some of these parties. It's on YouTube. It's disturbing. It's kind of strange. Tom Cole, sadly, who was one of the accusers, wasn't on the Donahue show, and actually he declined to be interviewed because he took a deal with the WWF. Some say just for hush money and whatnot, but again, I don't know the details of that, so I'm not going to speculate. But Tom Cole, though, apparently I think he was in the audience for the Donahue show. That's the rumor anyway. And he sadly recently took his own life. His brother went on Twitter to announce it. And it's very sad. This ended up destroying a lot of people. Again, I knew very little about it. The Larry King stuff. Vince did not come off looking good in this at all. I will say Vince kept his cool, but he really came off looking pretty bad. This isn't to say that all the accusers were, innocent until proven guilty, yes. But here's the thing we got to realize, too, now. The only one that felt disingenuous to me watching it years later is Murray Hodgson. He was apparently exposed as a lifetime con artist. And you could see it. You could see it when you watch him. Barry Orton, on the other hand, seemed very genuine. I don't dispute anything happened to him. But then you had idiots like superstar Billy Graham. Yeah, I don't care. I'm calling him an idiot. I mean, he was a great wrestler. Don't get me wrong. Great performer. But hopping on the bandwagon for money. Because the steroids scandal was exposed at that point. And that came to light even further because of all this. A current affair. Maybe even hard copy. I'm not sure if they covered it or not, but I'm willing to guess they did. I think Entertainment Tonight did something on it. It was all over the place. Funny how wrestling only hits the mainstream when this sort of thing happens, but I'm not saying if these things were true, then yes, they should have been brought to light. Terry Garvin has long since died, but he left the company pretty much right as these scandals were happening. Mel Phillips was gone. Rumors are that he's died as well. You can't find much on him. Pat Patterson, of course, just passed away very recently. But it seems like the general consensus is that, at least from some, I'm not saying this is necessarily mine, but from what others seem to feel is that Pat Patterson was scapegoated, if you will, as a scapegoat, whereas Garvin and Phillips were absolutely guilty. Now, I don't know if that's true. Again, I wasn't there. There was no court case. So, I don't know. It's one of those mysteries we'll never figure out because now all parties involved are gone. Like, as in the ones who were accused. We'll never know. But, again, like I said, Murray Hodgson was exposed later on. Nothing went any further with Barry Orton's legal action, I don't think. And, yeah. I mean, there you go. But Vince, I mean, he was ready to fight. I mean, like I said, he didn't come off looking great, but he was ready to fight, mentioning how when Barry Orton got out of prison, Vince gave him bookings on that, and now suddenly he's coming out and saying all this stuff. And I mean, Vince had the gloves on. Even if he didn't battle very well, he still had the gloves on. And I don't mean to make light of things, but check out that Donahue episode just for Dave Meltzer's mullet. I'm not kidding. Dave Meltzer is on there, and he's actually sitting with Vince. And yeah, check out the mullet. It's just epic. But no, as a kid, I didn't really know about this, and maybe it's good that I didn't, because it might have distorted my view of wrestling in a lot of ways. Despite how bad things can get in the world of professional wrestling, and we've seen it recently with the speaking out movement, it's still a lot about it I love. And there are times where I felt like, wow, this is sad. But all we can do is live and learn those things and try to make, and there's a lot of people out there trying to make wrestling a better place, and I tip my hat to them. But back to, of course, the show itself. Now, from a business standpoint, this couldn't have come at a worse time for Vince McMahon. WrestleMania VII the year before did not do overly well. It did okay. WrestleMania VIII would also not do very well in terms of pay-per-view buys. I have no official numbers because you can't really find them anywhere. There's a lot of rumors, but speculate this crowd was papered quite heavily with a few thousand. But still, even with a few thousand, it's over 50 they drew likely. So that's still a good draw, especially for this era. And it would be the last WrestleMania held in. I don't count WrestleMania 9. That was just like a makeshift kind of stadium, but an actual sports like stadium, which again we're used to every year now, pretty much. But it would be the last time. Actually, it would be the last time until WrestleMania X7. Which, lo and behold, I'm covering next week. Yes, there we go. It's already there. So then came the day of the show itself. So, invited over, there was, of course, myself, my dad, his buddy Kerry, his best friend at the time, my Uncle Roy, and I think my Uncle Bill was hanging around too. Like I said, my Uncle Bill was not a big wrestling fan, but he'd just come for like the social aspect of it and whatnot. Roy did not bring Mike with him this time, I remember, but because he brought him for the Rumble. Mike was only 3, mind you. But he was getting into wrestling at this point as well. So, we're really, really hyped for this. Like, again, I can feel the excitement. I just remember holding a bag of Hostess ketchup chips. Like, one of the big bags. And I'm just already eating away. And hearing those Vince McMahon voiceovers, I know he probably doesn't have the energy to do them anymore, but oh my goodness, I would just love to hear one more. Especially for the Royal Rumble, those were epic. But even like for this, like the World Wrestling Federation presents WrestleMania. Unbelievable. Like again, that's little things like that make me appreciate wrestling even to this day. There is a man who, despite being only known as a commentator at the time, who of course was always the owner, at least at this point for about 10 years, but he wanted to sell his product in the best way he could, and that's what he was doing that night. And that's what he was doing with every pay-per-view. He wanted to make people truly believe they're watching something special. Even if it didn't always end up that way, but that's the thing people are like, oh, it's over. Like, that's another thing that bothers me. Overhype. Oh, wow, he's making it sound epic. Like, well, if he's not selling his own product, then why the hell is he? Then what's the point? Of course, he should make his product sound important. Oh, it's gonna be the greatest show of them all. Like, people actually still do that, and that annoys me. I'm like, no, we all know it's probably not going to be the greatest show of all time every time they say it, and yeah, it's a bit laughable at times, but I understand why he's doing it. Again, if he doesn't give a shit, why should we? You know what I mean? So there you go. And the site of the stadium was, I'm thinking to myself, and I remember Kerry pointed this out, he's like, wow, there's a lot of empty patches. Gorilla Monsoon covered this by saying Daylight Savings, which I think it was that weekend. Yes, it was. And they weren't in the stadium yet, which ended up being true. You see the stadium fill out just a little more, but there was still a lot of people there, but it was still a nice sight. The Hoosier Dome looked pretty decent from a production presentation. And then Reba McEntire, this thing, Heenan and Monsoon, of course, are doing commentary for this show. Now, they say the peak is the Royal Rumble, but they're shelling out some gold here. Which at the beginning, you see Heenan just looking around, looking at his watch, all smiles, saying, "I am looking at the centerfold of Miss Elizabeth." The girl, don't start. Just like they're at it, and we're already laughing at them. And I remember Reba McEntire saying, I actually like Reba McEntire. She sang the national anthem. Right away, Heenan just starts in. Boy, can Tito's sister really belt one out? That's a Reba McEntire. Like, oh my god. Even I knew what that meant at that age, because, okay, like I said, I remember Tito cutting the Arriba, like ending promos with Arriba, but now it was Ole with the El Matador character. Then Tito's music hits. It's him and Shawn Michaels in the opening match. Oh my god. Okay, so I love Shawn Michaels' theme song. But Sherry singing it just, and I mean this in a good way, just made you just cringe a little. But I meant, like, that is a good thing, though. Like, I mean, to me, it just fit. I think that's the point. You want to get that, oh god, no, boo, no, ugh. Again, that's the little things that help define a heel. And Shawn Michaels came in there that I'm too sexy for this crowd jacket, which, timely reference. I remember somebody say, well, Shawn's reference is dated there. I'm like, that song was a hit right around that time. So it wasn't exactly dated. It was actually quite the relevant reference. I don't know. I think people are just a little off on their years. I guess they can't all be like me. No, I'm good with years. But anyway, so I'm thinking, oh, Tito's going to get him, and then... Now, this is the thing about having Kerry around. He would, he was very snarky at times, but he was hilarious at doing it. And Kerry says, Tito's a bum. Just like, I don't even remember if you ever won at a WrestleMania. And then I said, he won at the first one because I had that WrestleMania history book. The History of WrestleMania, like, magazine. And from, like, 1 to 7. Which I bought shortly before the show. And Terry's like, oh, excuse me, you were, like, how old back then? Like, he was joking about it. He wasn't trying to be an asshole. I'm like, I was 2. So, of course, me not picking up on his sarcasm, pulling a Sheldon Cooper there. And he's just thinking, no, Shawn's the future. He's like, he's not going to lose this. And then I think my dad made the joke, or it might have been my Uncle Roy, I don't remember who, but one of them said, I guess Shawn Michaels wants to be a backup singer for George Michael. Yeah, now I realize what that joke meant. Anyway. So, him and Tito opened the show. And I remember being pretty into the match, and Sherry looked really good here. My dude, there's very few times she didn't. But of course, we still all called her Scary Sherry from that infamous promo that Brutus Beefcake cut leading up to SummerSlam '89. And they seemed like a good pairing because Sherry had heat, and you pair her with somebody, they're going to have it as well. The thing with her and DiBiase, I mean, it was okay, but of course, her best days are with the Macho Man. I would rank DiBiase, like, in terms of her WWF run, I'm not counting Tatanka, but, like, out of her associations, I would say Shawn's second to only to her time with Macho. Time with DiBiase wasn't bad. It just, to me, it just wasn't needed. I don't know, but she really complimented Shawn here in this this whole scenario. Like Heenan, saying, oh, he just doesn't let any bimbo. I mean, he covers his words there quickly. Bimbo, did you say bimbo? Already Gorilla and Bobby are cracking us up, even though I don't understand every single joke they're making. But still, I remember understanding quite a few, though. And the match, again, I watched it not that long ago. It was good. Really solid opener. Some would think that the match between these two maybe a few years prior would have been better. But either way, they were clicking in some ways here. And there were some, spots that... there were some dead spots, but there wasn't, like, a terrible match by any means. It was a nice, solid opener. And yes, Shawn won with a weird finish. He just kind of, like, held onto a rope, I guess, as Tito was attempting a slam, and just kind of landed on him. Like, and I guess Tito tried to sell that he fell hard on his head. I guess that was the finish, but it just seemed kind of wonky to me. I just don't see why they couldn't have had Shawn hit his finisher here, which was at the time was like a side suplex kind of deal where he'd hook his hands between thighs and just lift them up over and boom. That was his finish at the time. It wasn't the sweet chin music, though he had the super kick in his repertoire since he was part of the Rockers. So there you go. But no, Shawn won the match. I was like, damn it, like, whatever. And then Kerry looks at me, see, I told you Tito's a bum. So the next match, actually, we didn't go right to a match yet. It was an interview with the Legion of Doom. The Legion of Doom had been off TV since losing their titles to Money Inc. in February. And they had this guy come out with them. I didn't know who he was. And my dad knew who he was, however. And so did Carrie. Oh, is that Precious Paul? That's Precious Paul. I'm like, who? And my dad said to me, Precious Paul Ellering. He was their manager. I'm like, no, he wasn't. Again, just completely ignoring their time in the NWA. And then my dad, in words I can understand, said, no, they were in WCW. He was their manager. I'm like, oh. So I understood it then, once he elaborated. So, they cut a promo pretty much saying, trying to sell their whole relationship and that. But again, with kayfabe back then, they didn't really refer too much to their past. But they did, but just didn't say how. Like, they didn't go into description. So, yeah, Paul Ellering was back. And pretty soon they'd have a dummy with them. I'm not kidding. I talked about that in my very first episode, the WWF Superstars taping in 1992. Again, check that out in the archives as well. That was shortly after this. So I remember being hyped that they were back. I hadn't seen them for weeks, and my dad was a huge fan of them too. He had their T-shirt. So the next match was Jake the Snake Roberts against the Undertaker. Here we go. And Jake's promo before this match, again, this would be his last WWF match for almost 4 years. Now again, he went to WCW shortly after this. Now the story goes, Jake wanted a backstage job with the company. Jake is a very creative mind, so he's been waiting for this chance. But Pat Patterson was gone at this point, of course, because of what I mentioned earlier. Pat would surely be back after, though. When Vince, I guess, told him, according to Jake anyway, and the Pick Your Poison DVD, saying, out of respect for Pat, we're not replacing that position. And Jake got upset that he wasn't moving to the creative aspect of things. And so he basically started searching elsewhere and held up Vince, not like the Warrior, but held up Vince not for money but for his release, saying he would not go out there and put over the Undertaker if he didn't get his release. So when some people call Jake a scummy kind of guy, I guess it's one of the reasons. Maybe there's several other stories out there that other wrestlers have told in the past in the territory days. I don't hate Jake. But I've been a big Jake the Snake Roberts, fan, as I mentioned before, for years. At this point, of course, I hated him. And I remember, again, still though, he's selling the match he's not, in the promo, he's not phoning it in. He's not he's acting like he's good. Some wrestlers are leaving. You can see they're leaving and they're not happy that they're, about the circumstances. Jake here still cuts a really good promo before the match. When he's watching the beatdown he tried on the Undertaker when he locked his hand in the casket. Boom! Jake's just really selling it, right? Fun for me, none for you. Or when he DDT Paul Bearer, short fall, bad landing. Just stuff like that is what made Jake great. And Jake actually was really wearing cool gear here. His wrestling trunks had it's like a woman wrapped in a snake with a little blue outline, and the rest of the trunks were white. This was unique for Jake because Jake always had cool combinations, but they were of gear in that. But this one was very unique for him. It was very different than what we were used to seeing with him, and I thought it was really cool. And of course, for his last WWF match, again for 4 years before he would jump to WCW. Again, Jake Roberts WCW. Check it out in the archives. So this match pretty one-sided. Jake gets obviously some offense in, but Taker looks indestructible as he just he seems impervious to it, even to DDTs. Now Jake does kill some time after those DDTs because you don't want to bury the finish either, right? So I get the logic here. But Taker still sits up from it twice. It was a short match. Taker tombstones Jake on the outside, rolls into the ring, and gets the win. So, yeah, it put over the Undertaker strong. We're happy he won. He destroyed Jake. And Bobby Heenan. Now, again, this is one of the things that made Bobby so great. Just the little things he did. He even said, I've never seen Jake Roberts beaten like that. Really putting over the Undertaker. Because it's true. Jake, now again, yes, Jake didn't win all the time, but he was never, ever squashed by anyone. And at this point, he'd been with the company for a better part of 6 years. So, yeah, Jake was never really squashed or dominated by anyone like that. Even when he lost a match, he got a lot of offense in. So there you go, and that was it for Jake. that was it for him for a long time in WWF. So next up, we had a match with Bret the Hitman Hart and Roddy Piper. Now, the hype for this was superb. Now, I mentioned how they actually had a history. They played up the fact that they've known each other most of their lives, like the whole family. Then that was the story they were playing up. Yes, they are distantly related or directly, I don't know. But they played that up, though. It was perfect. And some of the segments on Superstars leading up to it, again, the face-to-face encounter where it looked like Piper was going to blindside Bret with the title, and they nearly came to blows. And then that was the great thing about this hype too. They never went at it. You don't see that much, even with the face versus face like scenarios. You don't see it much anymore. Now again, the Piper Intercontinental run was basically a reward for his hard work, which obviously he deserves. But Piper never was obsessed with Piper wanted to make money. That was every wrestler's objective back then. As long as Piper was making money, he didn't necessarily need a title. He held titles many times in territories, but in the WWF, that was his first, as I mentioned in the Royal Rumble podcast. So, Piper's pretty much retiring yet again. And this match, the crowd was just really amped up for this, and this was an amazing, just wonderful story being told here about two guys, again, and it sells the importance of the title. They're throwing their friendship out the window because being a champion and being a competitor is important to them. I thought that was great storytelling, even as a kid. And even I didn't even know what the term storytelling meant in wrestling, but I was just captivated by it. Then when there's a match, I believe it aired on Primetime Wrestling between Shawn Michaels and Roddy Piper for the Intercontinental title, and Bret interfered, kind of getting Roddy disqualified. And I remember Roddy just screaming at Bret, "Stay out of my life!" Like, just says it with such conviction. You see Bret just looks depressed. And again, this was some great stuff. Now, people say Bret is not the greatest on the mic. Again, I've gone over this several times. I'm maybe biased because he's my all-time favorite wrestler, but he's not near as bad as everyone says he is. Was Bret on the level of, great mic men like The Rock or Steve Austin, Terry Funk, or, Ric Flair, or even Piper? His opponent, he may not be on the level of those kind of guys, or an Ernie Ladd or whatever, but he at least sold the match. You know what I mean? He was at least selling what was happening. Sometimes he did better. Again, I will say this over and over. When it's a personal issue, Bret is superb on the mic. His promos leading up to the match, again, I've mentioned this several times, his promos leading up to the matches with Lawler. Amazing. The stuff with Owen. Great. Bret was not as bad on the mic as people say he is. Was he, again, not great? Sure. But there were some great stuff. People just say, 97, he was... Well, yeah, obviously, but still, there was stuff before that. And again, even when his promos weren't the best, he still got the story across. And that is important. So again, we're all right into this match. We are all just dead zeroed in, focused on this. Again, we've been waiting for this for a long time. And the crowd loves both guys. They are divided. And the blood back then wasn't seen very often in the WWF. I didn't see it very often, period. And oh my goodness, he's pulverizing Bret. And I even looked at my dad saying, Piper's kind of wrestling like a bad guy here. And I remember I was going for Bret. I love Piper, but I was going for Bret. And the way they built this all up, when Piper bringing in the bell, when the referee's out, Piper's ready to cheat to keep his title. Now, the old Piper probably would have done it, but this Roddy Piper has more integrity that way. And it worked perfectly, because again, if you don't get the desired reaction, then this finish just falls flat. But the crowd was turning on Piper once he had the bell, urging him not to use it. Heenan was classic. Hit him, waffle him. You know that old saying, what the hell, use a bell? Just too much. And Piper thinks better of it and just tries to finish Bret with his patented sleeper. And then the reversal of all reversals. Bret kicks off the ropes, lands on Piper, who still has the hold locked, but his shoulders are down and Bret's digging into him with using his head and his body, and he can't get up. And ref counts 3. Piper never really took pinfalls on television. Actually, he never did, at least with his WWF run. And that's and I remember everyone ran oh my god, he lost, because nobody was used to it. It was a big deal, and the fact that they let Bret pin Piper on television, which did not happen, showed that they were really doing something with Bret. And Kerry said the same thing about Bret. I'll love Hot Rod till the day I die. He's but no, Bret's the guy now. He even said that. Bret's the guy now. And I jumped up out of the couch when Bret won. So that was Bret's second Intercontinental title win, and just an epic match. Again, they shook hands after, Piper giving the endorsement, and Piper was gone. So retired yet again. And to be fair, later on in life, Piper made fun of how many times he retired. So it's yeah, it is what it is. So yes, 3 matches, 2 guys are going to be gone from the company. Now, before we get to the 8-man tag, Bobby Heenan introduces, and I mentioned this in the Super Brawl podcast, and I said I would talk about it, a surprise. Lex Luger, the newest signee to the WBF, the World Bodybuilding Federation. Vince McMahon's pet project, which is the root of punchlines to this day. Other than popularizing IcoPro in a cult fashion, but not the actual product, merely the reference, the World Bodybuilding Federation served no purpose to that many wrestling fans at all. But Vince wanted the brand to be hyped up. So he brought Lex Luger on board. Yes, this guy who was just a WCW champion a month before this. Wrestling fans know who Lex is. No, I'm not saying every WWF fan does, but a good chunk of fans still know who he is. He's been a tippy-top guy on the upper tier since he walked into WCW. He walked in there in 87 and left in 92. That's almost 5 years. So anyway, Lex again cuts a good arrogant heel promo here. You know, the line I love, the line I love from Lex here, though. Actually, it's a great heel line where he just says, Bobby, not only is it your pleasure, but it's the pleasure of everyone else out there. It's again just little things like that. Lex as a heel was superb. But yes, for the World Bodybuilding Federation, that one puzzled me, and that's what I was saying. Kerry was just looking at me. He's like, no, he's got to wrestle sometime. He's not gonna be a bodybuilder. And then he was right, though. Lex would obviously eventually end up wrestling for the company. With pure narcissism. Narcissist. Yeah, I'll cover that one today. But anyway, so I was really intrigued to see Luger there, but I was disappointed that he's going to be a bodybuilder. I'd rather see him wrestle. I actually thought a match with him and Hogan would be well, and while WCW would capitalize on that 5 years later. But still. So, next up is the 8-man tag. It's the babyface side is the Big Boss Man, Virgil, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, and Sergeant Slaughter. The latter two had been teaming up for a little while against the Nasty Boys, the Mountie, and the Repo Man. My God, how some of the mighty have fallen. The Nasty Boys, a year ago at this point, at WrestleMania VII, had just defeated the Hart Foundation and become the tag team champions. It was pretty shocking at the time. Repo Man was Demolition Smash. The Mountie was, the Mountie. I don't know. I like Jacques Rougeau. He was really good in the character. Also, the Boss Man was in a high-profile Intercontinental title match with Mr. Perfect the year prior. Virgil had an epic feud and an epic face turn with the $1 Million Man a year prior. Now he's wearing a nose guard after Sid Justice beat the crap out of him. That was actually a good segment, too. Sid just ramming Virgil's face right into the exposed buckle and breaking his nose. Great stuff. Also, you had Hacksaw. Hacksaw was always... he's always in these kind of spots, whatever. He never really had a big high-profile WrestleMania match that way. So again, I guess I shouldn't say he's fallen too far down the card because he's pretty much at the same place he's always been. But the one who fell the most. People talk about the WrestleMania's fall from grace. They talk about King Kong Bundy teaming up with the Little People. They talk about the Miz after his defense against Cena at WrestleMania 27. Now, Slaughter faced Hulk Hogan in a WrestleMania main event the year prior in a world title match. Now he's in an 8-man tag. I think this one gets overlooked when it comes to WrestleMania Falls from Grace. The highlight of this match was not the match itself, it was Ray Combs. Ray Combs, the host of Family Feud at the time. Ray sadly is no longer with us. He sadly took his own life. And I liked Ray Combs. Now, a lot of people, of course, Ray Combs had big shoes to fill when Richard Dawson departed the show. At least Ray Combs wasn't groping every woman contestant on the show. I'll give him that. I found Ray Combs to be funny. I thought he had a good game show host presence about him. He had a relationship with the WWF at the time because he had wrestlers on Family Feud. They were about to do the WWF versus the WBF, and they would do the good guys versus the bad guys on Family Feud for 1 week as well later on for charity, obviously. So yeah, it was some good stuff here from Ray Combs, making some good jokes. Like again, it's not A-list material you're gonna hear from Dave Chappelle, but it was still funny for the time, and I still was mildly amused by it, and we found it funny at the house. When he made fun of the Nasty Boys, he's getting ready to run because he knows they're going to come after him. But the match itself just was a filler. It was obviously, you just had that really exciting Intercontinental title match against you had the opener, which was good. You had the Undertaker match, which, obviously fans love the Undertaker. And you had that hot Intercontinental title match. And the 8-man tag it served its purpose, and it got everybody a payday. The faces won the match after they tried to hit Virgil with his protective mask, and Virgil ducked and pinned one of the Nasty Boys to win. So yeah, it wasn't bad, but I mean, again, I understand sometimes you want to give your guys a payday. I understand that. I just nothing. It served its purpose. You know what I mean? Even WrestleMania needs calm down matches, which I don't want to call it a bathroom break match because I think a lot of these guys in this match are above that. But still, it is what it is. So then came one half of the double main event. It was Macho Man versus Ric Flair. Oh boy. Here we go. Heenan during Flair's entrance. Incredible. If you want to be fair to Flair, you got to be fair and say that's one hell of a rogue. Only a man as fair as Flair would show up at Wrestle. Like, he just kept going on and Gorilla with the most epic, "Will you stop?" ever. He yells it, screams it almost. Don't yell at me. And Flair again, just rocking the robe like always, just again presenting himself like a champion. Macho comes out and he's just a house of fire. The crowd goes nuts from as soon as his entrance music hits. And again, this is the beauty of this feud. Back then, they didn't touch. They weren't even in the same ring or the same segment together. While this guy is talking about his wife, but that's what made it so good. And what a story built up here. Again, these two always had mad chemistry. And I remember being right in this, like, we're on the edge of our seats. Just, again, I'm like clutching my chips bag, hoping for Macho to win. But the great story here, Mr. Perfect keeps interfering. And then adding to it, Elizabeth coming down. Like, again, she hadn't been on TV much. She wasn't really a full-time TV character. She hadn't been for quite a while at this point. She'd pop up for stuff here and there, like the wedding and, like, again, stuff like that, right? But she hadn't really been on TV all that much. She got a great reaction, I remember, when she came out, and the officials were trying to get her to go backstage. Flair, though, just superb here. And I remember, even as a kid who hated him, this made me laugh. When he looks down, when he's got Macho in the corner now the big turning point in this match is that Perfect cheap shotted Macho's knee. So Flair's working it over. And Perfect keeps interfering and throwing in foreign objects and whatnot, like stuff like that. It's a good story where they're constantly cheating and Macho, however, still not going down. But when Flair has Savage in the corner and he looks down at Liz, "It's for you, baby!" And Heenan, she winked. She did not. And then shortly after came the finish, where Flair was going to keep working over the knee to set up for the figure four, like he was going to go for it again. He already failed it earlier in the match. Macho turned it over, but then he's softening up even more. But then Macho just decks Flair when he's holding his leg, and then out of nowhere hooks the trunks and cheats to win. Awesome. Savage is champion again. It keeps the story going. And the fact that they cheated the whole match, and the one time Macho cheats, he wins. And they're going nuts. Like, the crowd's going nuts. There's a post-match beatdown. The officials are getting involved. Billy Red Lyons, my man, he's there. And Flair gets in Elizabeth's face, plants a kiss on her. Liz slaps him. The crowd goes apeshit for that. Anytime Elizabeth did anything, the crowd, like, because again, she wasn't like a, she didn't get, like, physically involved at all, really. I remember the time she did, though, the crowd would pop huge. Like, whenever she, like, hit Sherry or whatever, like, they would love it. Again, it just goes to show if you don't do something too often and you're well loved by fans, it's going to get a great reaction. And Liz was definitely well loved by fans. So, eventually, they get the heels out of the ring, Perfect and Flair, and Heenan is losing it. Because, again, Heenan is associated with Flair, for those who may not know. And he throws off his headset, runs away after going, no, like for almost a minute straight. I don't think it was that long. It was seen that way. And he runs out of the broadcast booth. Macho celebrates, and then the pyro goes off. But it shows how personal this feud really is, because the post-match promos here were brilliant, and it was a great way to keep the house shows hyped up. Flair, all bloodied up. Now, he was bloody in this match, too. I forgot to mention, he got bloodied up real good. Of course, it's Ric Flair, so it's not too shocking. Now, I'll go to the story later where Bret made it look like it was hard way, but Flair actually, bladed and got in trouble, whereas Bret bladed as well, but convinced, because Bret's blade job in that Piper match was so well done, that he actually had Vince McMahon convinced it was hard way. Bret later admitted in his book it wasn't. So, Flair cuts this all Perfect coming in all hot, and Heenan just losing his shit while Sean Mooney's interviewing him. Perfect, shut up, Mooney! Just great stuff here, and I love the justification. Perfect heel justification. We were out there, we were wrestling. You cheated, Savage. You had a handful of trunks. It was great. And of course, me as a kid, no, they cheated. They were like, I was going nuts. And then, of course, the adults are laughing at me. So, the final of it, like in Flair cutting that great promo, he's lost, but he's pissed off, but, he's saying it's not over pretty much, and he says every time he sees Elizabeth, he's going to kiss her. Like, wow. And then Heenan, when he leaves the locker room, like, just hits the payphone in the corner. Just such a great visual. Like I said, it's just, again, little things like that made Bobby so great. Savage, again, cuts a crazy promo, and he's not finished. Like I said, he's happy he's the champion. He's, over the moon, but he said he only just took a little piece of what he wanted from Flair. Because, again, he was beaten a lot in that match, but he wants to truly kill him, it seems. So the title was just the start. Savage wants to keep this personal. Again, it's a great way to keep advancing the feud. It shows how personal it really had gotten. Again, this is when you put two performers like this together, and again, I know I'm probably, saying something that's been said a million times by a million other people. But it's true, though. And for a time, like I said, for a time where the business may not have been the greatest, but for as a kid, and even looking back on it now, it's fond memories. I wanted to see more of this. Like, ooh, I can't wait to see a rematch between these two. Maybe a cage match. Like, that's what I was thinking. So anyway, break time. We go to fill up our pops, get more chips, and yeah, and we're ready for the next half of the show. Now, Gorilla recaps the Hulk Hogan and Sid Justice feud, which, again, they built up Sid really well for this. They paired him with Harvey Whippleman, which I personally think would have been better if they just paired him with someone else. Nothing against Harvey Whippleman. I actually liked Harvey Whippleman, but I don't know. Just the thing is, him and Sid just didn't seem to click. I don't know. Something about it just seemed off. I think someone that would have been good with Sid would have been Slick, but Slick was gone at this point. That's when he was ordained as a reverend, I believe. So, but I think Slick, I don't know, for some reason I just picture Sid with Slick more than I picture Harvey Whippleman. Jimmy Hart, not so much. I don't think his Sid's personality goes with him. If Heenan was still managing, Heenan could have managed Sid. Heenan would have been great with Sid. So there you go. But yeah, so they're recapping that. There's, like I said, downtime, getting ready for the second half of the show, and then they showed the natives dancing in the ring, from the Lumbee tribe, is what Gorilla Monsoon said. And next up was Tatanka versus the Model, Rick Martel. Rick Martel cuts a very risque promo, which is, I'd say, borderline racist, against Tatanka. Again, I understand. I'm not going to be the what were they thinking generation, as Bill Maher calls it. It was what it was at the time. No need to go into it. Obviously, nobody would do that today. But it wasn't okay then. Yes, okay, fine, whatever. Like, I get it, but either way. I remember when Martel said the scalping tickets line. I remember my dad just kind of going, oh, yeah, even back then it was making people uncomfortable, folks. There you go. So Tatanka, Rick Martel. Tatanka at this point had only been on TV maybe about a couple months. He'd been floating, he'd been under contract, I think, for a while. Not quite a year, but I think in late 91 is when he started getting tryout matches and doing dark matches as Chris Chavis, his real name. And they rechristened him Tatanka. There was always a plan that he was going to do the Native American gimmick, because he legit is, which was actually rare in wrestling back then. There weren't too many legit, full-blooded Native Americans. So yeah, Tatanka was one of the first. I like Tatanka. I mean, my grandmother, who of course I mentioned at the top of this podcast, that's another reason why I dedicate the show to her. The one wrestler she did enjoy in this era was Tatanka, because she loves Native history. My grandmother was obsessed with Native history, reading books about Geronimo and all that, just everything. She had every movie related to natives. It was she was, again, she almost wanted, she said she wishes she was one. But yeah, no, that was just one of her interests in that. She liked Tatanka, and because again, the one wrestler she likes is the legit native. So Tatanka, hey, again, explains Little Beaver, right? Explains why she loved Little Beaver. But Tatanka here and Rick Martel, now, again, after the first half of the show, a lot happened. Now, people criticize often how this show was spaced out, and I can see their point. But really, again, you still need that to come down. But I mean, the fans had a good, I think, 15-minute breather or so, maybe even a little longer. It's practically an intermission before this match got started. At this point, though, Martel hadn't really been doing all that much. A year prior, he was feuding with Jake Roberts in a pretty high-profile feud on the mid-card, upper mid-card. And Tatanka, again, he was liked by fans, but he wasn't quite as popular as he would become even later in the year. So, yeah. They did hype up Tatanka's undefeated streak going into this, and Martel would be a formidable challenge because he's been around a while. But Tatanka pretty much easily won the match. We weren't really into it. We were actually kind of still getting our refreshments ready. And this thing, I liked it, but I wasn't again, I needed to calm down after everything I seen in that first half of the show. So next up, after that, was the Natural Disasters against Money Incorporated. Earthquake as a face just seemed wrong. I mean, I've seen Typhoon as a face as Tugboat, but Earthquake, smiling. I mean, in this match, they were more business because it was personal as well with Jimmy Hart. And again, it was a decent story leading up to it. The Disasters were pissed off. Jimmy Hart sold them out and gave their title shot to the Money Incorporated. So they dumped them. Or he dumped them, depending on who you believe. So it was, it was, like I said, it was a good story leading up to it. But the match itself was very forgettable. I remember cheering for the Disasters, but of course DiBiase and IRS pulled the coward thing, the Honky Tonk Man finish, and walk away with the titles. And that was it. Again, probably leading to house show stuff. So then, after that, we had Owen Hart versus Skinner. Now, I know you guys realize I'm going through the second half of the show pretty fast. That's because the second half of the show was pretty fast. I guess time constraints made them speed it up. Why? Because there's supposed to be a match between the British Bulldog and the Berserker that never took place. Mighty, I'm not crying over it, even though I love Davey Boy Smith, but still. Owen Hart versus Skinner barely lasted a minute. Skinner spits tobacco juice at Owen, tries to throw him out of the ring. Owen skins the cat. Skinner plays with the crowd. Owen rolls him up, and it's over. Owen at this point was wearing, again, he hadn't even started teaming with Coco yet. Now people, reference high energy with the parachute pants and suspenders, the bright neon parachute pants and suspenders with the checkers on the boots and that. It actually started with the New Foundation, because Neidhart was rocking that shit while doing commentary before Owen even came to the company. So it predates High Energy that look almost predates High Energy by like a year. So there you go. High Energy would form shortly after this, however. But Owen, it just is not a good look for him. Poor guy. But hey, things would get better eventually for him in a couple years. So that was it. That was literally, again, 3 matches. Like, the Tonka Martel match was maybe about 5-6 minutes. Owen and Skinner, again, the Disasters in Money Inc. was closer to 10. But still, it wasn't overly long either, and just was a ho-hum match. And Skinner versus Owen was, again, like a minute. So then was Sid and Hogan. So here we go. Now, the hype for this was going to be Hulk Hogan's last match. And the beauty is Sid saying, I'm going to make sure it's your last match. Again, perfect storytelling right there. I like the way they did it because it would make Sid look like, a monster if he did retire Hogan. And despite the scandals going on, again, the steroid scandals and whatnot with the company and Hogan and whatnot, Hogan's reaction was amazing here. And you can see he's overwhelmed by it too, a little bit. So clearly Hogan looks like he's going away for a while. The match, we were into it. Again, you watch it now, it's not even the best match by a Hogan rating, or whatever, if you want to call it that. I always enjoyed Hogan's matches for the most part anyway. I don't care what anyone says. But this one, not as memorable as others, not as great as others, but still, there was emotional investment there. But even this match wasn't overly long for a main event. Mind you, again, most Hogan matches, but even like the Hogan Savage matches and the Slaughter match was longer than this. But Hogan's main event matches at WrestleMania, other than Andre, went pretty long for the most part. I know the Bundy one wasn't overly long either, but still. It just didn't seem like, again, the Macho Man Ric Flair match obviously was the longest of the night. Which, to be fair, who's involved? To be fair, who's involved, obviously that's going to happen. So, Hogan and Justice here engaged in a pretty, pretty okay match. And I guess Papa Shango miscued his run-in because Sid had to kick out of the leg drop. So, Hogan's being beat down, of course. It's a disqualification finish. Harvey Whippleman tries to come in to buy some time for Shango. Again, kudos to him for being a pro there. And yeah, it's Shango mistimed it apparently, and he makes his way down there finally. They commence the beatdown. And well, who's going to save him? We're not even knowing who's going to save him. I was thinking maybe Bret in my head, but Bret was all bloodied up earlier. I don't know. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, you hear that din 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 din, and then all of us, our eyes and our jaws wide open. And then we see that familiar Bolt sprint to the ring. It's the Warrior. And honestly, we all cheered. A great WrestleMania moment right there. That match itself may not be memorable to a lot of people, that return of the Warrior is. He comes right in there, clothesline Shango out of the ring. Sid tries to belt him with a chair a couple times. Warrior just keeps shaking the ropes. Hogan finally chases him off. And it ends with the two men in the ring with the pyro going off. Hogan and Warrior, former adversaries, turned friends. And that's how WrestleMania ends. It was a great way to end the show. That second half of the show may not have been all that great. WrestleMania VII had a similar problem the year before, where the first half was just unbelievable, and the second half just kind of tapered off. And yeah, it was a great ending, and I was so hyped for the Warrior being back. I was talking about it all week at school. But you look at it, it's fitting to a point, because Hogan did leave. He took a sabbatical for a year to film Mr. Nanny and whatnot. And it's a way of saying, okay, you're going to help carry things going forward. So think about it. Going into this show, a lot of people there, but who's gone? Jake the Snake Roberts is gone. Roddy Piper's gone. And now Hogan's gone. And these aren't just, every member of the roster is important in a way, but these are guys who were huge draws. These are guys who made the company and made themselves a lot of money. But Warrior coming back, certainly on paper at least, looked to fill a major void being left behind by these three leaving. But going forward, you had fresh upper tier talent. Now, Bret Hart had been around a while, but again, his singles run was barely a year old at this point. And his popularity was growing. The Undertaker had just turned face. And again, he himself had only been around just over a year and a half or so. Warrior had been gone for a while. So again, even when a big name like that is gone, he's fresh again when he comes back. So things looked not overly bleak despite the scandals. But the spring of 92 proved to be kind of a boring time for the company, which I somewhat touched on. But again, as a kid, I loved it. But compared to other eras, in hindsight, it wasn't the best. But it's fond memories as a kid, and that's all that matters. I couldn't wait to get to school the next day after the show to talk to my friend Sandra, especially about it. Again, we were talking about the Warriors' return, talking about that Bret Hart Roddy Piper match, the Undertaker dominating Jake Roberts. That's the stuff we were talking about. Those were the big talking points. And, of course, the Macho Man becoming champion. That was huge. And, yeah, it was just great. Fond memories, which I'll always cherish. That's what this show is all about. I went a little longer than I wanted to today, but that's okay. I enjoyed talking about WrestleMania VIII and everything leading up to it. That's going to do it, however, for this week. Next week, I mentioned earlier, WrestleMania X7. I'll try not to be as long. I can't make any guarantees, though. So yes, WrestleMania X7 next week. Cannot wait. If you want to follow me on social media, find me at BillChase33 on both Twitter and Instagram. You can find me on Facebook, just simply Bill Chase. Add me, we'll talk old wrestling, we'll talk new wrestling even. But I like especially talking about the good old days before wrestlers were soft. Just kidding. Kind of. Not, I really am, I'm joking. Trying to trigger some people there. But anyway, that's going to do it. So again, until next time, this is your friend of mine, Bill Chase, quoting my all-time favorite Hamiltonian, when I tell you all, don't you dare miss it. Thank you for listening to Diary of a Wrestling Fan with Bill Chase. For those who made contributions to the show, Bill just wants to say thank you! He finally got over 400 followers on Twitter! After 10, 11 years, maybe